I just have this nagging feeling 2026 is the year where the societal backlash against AI becomes real. I
Yeah.
think we're going to 12 months from now be having conversations about people that looked at us a weird way because of what we end up doing.
Welcome to the Artificial Intelligence Show, the podcast that helps your business grow smarter by making AI approachable and actionable. My name is Paul Raitzer. I'm the founder and CEO of SmarterX and Marketing AI Institute, and I'm your host. Each week, I'm joined by my co-host and SmarterX Chief Content Officer, Mike Kaput, as we break down all the AI news that matters and give you insights and perspectives that you can use to advance your company and your career. Join us as we accelerate AI literacy for all. Welcome to episode 188 of the Artificial Intelligence Show. I am your host, Paul Raitzer, along with my co-host, Mike Kaput. We are coming to you, I guess it's like Christmas week, right? It is the holidays. We are recording this on Friday, December 19th, because Mike and I are both trying to be out of the office, I would say, the next 2 weeks largely. So we thought we'd get one more episode in. So this will be the final episode of the year. So thanks to everyone who's been with us throughout the year. We appreciate it. We will be back January 6th, Mike, I think is our next one. Is that right?
Yes,
Next
it
weekly.
is.
So you have 1 week without the weekly updates. So again, just appreciate everybody, all the, amazing stuff we've been hearing from people, especially the last couple of weeks, sharing, their experiences with the podcast throughout the year. So thanks for being with us. We will be back bigger and better in 2026. So before we get into it, I'll say it again, probably at the end, but happy holidays, happy new year, and looking forward to being a part of your AI journey starting next year as well. All right, so this episode is brought to us by AI Academy by SmarterX. AI Academy helps individuals and businesses accelerate their AI literacy and transformation through personalized learning journeys and an AI-powered learning platform. There are 9 professional certificate course series available on demand now, with more being added each month, in addition to the Gen AI app. I know, Mike, you just dropped one on 5.2, right? Do we have Gen AI app reviews coming out on 5.2?
Went live the day we're recording, Friday,
Awesome.
December 19th.
Yeah, so if you haven't checked out those, if you're part of an AI Mastery membership, those are exclusive to the AI Mastery memberships. And there's got to be like 14 of them already, I think we've knocked out. I mean, it's a lot.
I think Jess was telling me the other day, it might be over 20.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I'm like
we've
losing
been cranking
track.
them out.
Yeah, so definitely check that out. If you're an AI Mastery member, you have access to all of those. You can go in and knock those out. They're like 15, 20-minute reviews. It's a really cool format. And then the certificate series is, the longer multiple courses grouped together. So today we'll spotlight the AI for Department collection. So right now we have 3 AI for Department course series with professional certificates. There's AI for Marketing, which is obviously a wildly popular one, AI for Sales, and AI for Customer Success. So those series are available for individual purchase, but if you are a Mastery member, they are included in that Mastery membership. So you can go to academy.smarterx.ai, learn more about all of the courses and the AI Mastery membership program. It'd be a great way to kick off the new year for you or your team in your organization. All right, AI Pulse, Mike, we'll take a quick look. Now, this has only been live for a few days, so we have fewer responses than normal. Again, these are informal polls of our audience, just to get feedback, sentiment of what's, how people are thinking about the things that we're talking about on the podcast. So last week we asked, does the new Disney OpenAI deal change your perspective on using AI video tools like Sora for creative or business projects? 62% said no, my opinion hasn't changed, by far the biggest answer. And then a mix of, yes, it'll make me more confident in the technology's legitimacy, only 13%. Another 13%, I'm not sure. And then 12%, it raises more concerns about creator rights. The second question was regarding the new executive order on AI regulation. And again, if these aren't familiar topics, you just go back and listen to episode 186. We talked about both of these at length. You can just scan the timestamps and go right to that topic if you want. So regarding the new executive order on AI regulation, do you believe a single federal standard is better than individual state laws? Now, again, informal poll, but 63% say, yes, a single federal standard is better for consistency. So that is far and away the dominant answer here. All right. And then this week, Mike, we've got a couple more questions. So you can go to, give me the URL again, Mike,
smarterx.ai/pulse.
There we go. So this week, 2 questions. A new report suggests generative AI hasn't significantly disrupted employment yet, What is your personal experience with AI and job security so far? We're going to talk about that report in today's episode. And then another one we're going to touch on today: amid growing political pushback and calls for a moratorium on new data centers. That was Senator Bernie Sanders, who was calling for that. Do you believe governments should pause AI infrastructure expansion to address resource concerns? So again, you can go to smarterx.ai/pulse and answer those questions and be a part of the results when we talk about those on the next episode, which will be January 6th. All right. So Mike and I were just sort of debating again. We're recording this on like three days, a short week. Things are starting to wind down, it seems, from the labs. I think most people have gotten most of what they're going to release out before the end of this week. And so the way we decided to approach it was sort of take a look at what are the trends moving forward. So if you're a part of our AI Mastery membership, Mike and I actually do quarterly trends briefings for our Mastery members. It's a feature that's an exclusive to Mastery members. And we basically get together and we do like 10 things from that quarter that are key. And then we do Ask Me Anything session with our members as part of it. So what we thought we would do here is just like I would say this is a little bit more informal because it's kind of like thoughts I've been having for a while. It's not really tied directly to the podcast per se and like exact trends we've been touching on. It was more of, I sat down and was like, I wonder what's going to happen next year. And so I would not call this first segment predictions necessarily. They're really just the things that I've been looking at that seem to me what I would be watching for next year from a personal perspective, a business perspective, a political perspective. And so that's what we wanted to kick off today is we're going to get into these trends, and then we're going to talk about a couple of really interesting podcast episodes from key leaders of Google DeepMind. And so really these main topics today are going to be kind of forward-looking as to where this all kind of goes over the next 12 months maybe. And then our rapid fire is going to be all the stuff that happened this week. So Mike, I'll kick it back over to you and lead us in that conversation.
Yeah, for sure, Paul. So, like you had mentioned, we wanted to talk through just what are AI trends to watch in 2026. I know you've got quite a few, Paul. I'm not going to step on your toes here, but after you say them on it, do want to share. I asked Notebook LM, which is loaded with all of our podcast
Nice.
episodes, what it thought based on our conversations were some things worth noting. I think you're actually going to touch on most of them.
Okay, cool.
But I would love to hear what's been on your mind and your progression of where you think we're headed, what we should be paying attention to.
All right, cool. Yeah, and so like Mike mentioned this, but we do have a Notebook LM that Mike maintains that has every like episode in it. So it's kind of a cool application of AI to be able to go in. And I think Mike, you use that quite frequently, right?
Oh
Like
gosh,
even
like
just
10 times a day.
oh, is
For
that right?
stuff. And
Yeah,
our team
I've
is using it too as well to see when the vendors have been mentioned, partners, things like
that's
that.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a fun application. I dabble in it time to time, but I don't spend a ton of time in it. But it's a really cool way to do it. All right. So again, this is like I said, it's pretty informal. I did not spend a lot of time like building these out. I would say these are more of like instinct and just overall sort of feeling of what's really going to matter moving forward. And so I just broke these down. And again, Mike, if there's any of these that you want to like stop and drill into, like just stop me along the way. Um, but I broke it into technology itself. So what's happening with AI technology in the enterprise or like the business implications of these things. And then in society. So I'm just going to kind of like high level these. And like I said, we can zoom into any of them that seem interesting. And then a lot of these do end up being things that Demis and Shane Legg talk about in their podcast episodes. So we'll have a chance to revisit those. So from a technology perspective, one of the things that I've been watching throughout this year, and I think becomes more real next year as we move into more of this agent economy and the agents start becoming more real and more reliable, is agent-to-agent communications and commerce. So as businesses, something we have talked about on the podcast is this idea that the people or the things visiting your website might not be humans. They might be people's agents. The agents you have on your site to interact with visitors, my agent might be talking to your agent. Agents might be buying from agents. Like we're going to start to move into this phase where agent to agent becomes more commonplace. I would not say next year is like the tipping point where like 50% or more of visitors to your site are agents and things like that. But I think that this idea becomes more real as the agents become more reliable, more autonomous to a degree. So I think marketers in particular, customer service, certainly sales, like all those facets of the organization. I think you're going to have more and more conversations around this agent to agent idea. Um, Another thing that's going to happen from a technology perspective is personalization of AI assistants. We've known for a while this is a focus area specifically for OpenAI. Demis talks a little bit about this in the episode we're going to touch on next. Um, so it's this idea that the AI labs are going to give people the ability to personalize their experience with the AI assistants, the tone, the style, their personal preferences, maybe political leanings, religious leanings. Like you're going to be able to sort of customize these AI assistants to understand you better. And so Mike and I might use the exact same model, the exact same assistant, but our experience with them may be completely different because it's learned our different styles and preferences and traits and what's interesting to us and what we research. And like all of that is going to come into the personalization. Now, Mike, that's one we've talked about a lot. I'll stop there and see like if you have any other thoughts on the personalization side, just based on things we've looked at ourselves.
Yeah, I think this becomes both so important and such a differentiator. It's
Yeah.
going to be basically at some point the only thing that differentiates between the models. They're all within what, 3 to 6 months of each other
Yeah.
anyway, at least at the current pace. Not to say there aren't real differences between how the tools work, but I think you're just going to get so attached to whatever tool has the most context and personal information about you. Also, interesting, just as a quick wrap up here, that ties into your previous topic. As businesses are thinking about agent to agent communication or showing up, for instance, in AI, so like AEO is a big thing right now. People often forget your tool is personalized to you. So, like when you say, "Oh my gosh, ChatGPT is mentioning us," when I ask for like best marketing agency in Cleveland, like, no, it knows you work for that marketing agency, right? So, just a word of caution: be careful. Personalization makes a lot of things wonky as well as useful in your ChatGPT or Gemini account.
No doubt. Um, yeah, so I agree, and I think that one of the big debates is going to be how sticky is that personalization. So
Mm,
if, like, let's say you're a power user of ChatGPT and it gets really, really good at knowing you and adjusting to you, does that eventually prevent you from trying the other platforms more? And you just like Gemini's amazing, but the switching factor is so high for me because ChatGPT just gets me. That'll be interesting. I don't know that we're there yet. I don't know that that keeps people from moving from one AI system to the other.
yeah.
But there are definitely times I can even see it for myself where I'll have a use case that I need help with. And it's like, ChatGPT just has more knowledge about our company. I'll just jump into co-CEO because it's already there and it's
Mhm.
personalized. And so I do find myself making decisions because I use Gemini and ChatGPT probably 50-50 right now, I would say. Um, and sometimes I do default from a personalization perspective of just like the one that's like just better at that planning, and I've like developed a rapport almost with it for that
Yeah.
use case. Um, Another one on the technology side, we talked a lot about this year, is the reliability of agents on long horizon tasks. Meaning, if you need something that's instant, it's information retrieval, it's a quick output. Like I think what ChatGPT calls it, fast. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
everybody's got like Gemini and ChatGPT both have these like immediate, like, hey, if you just need something right away, use this version of the model.
Yep.
But if you need something that's going to take time, it could be 10 minutes, it could be eventually an hour, like that ability to use these things to do those longer horizon tasks, which then by as a byproduct starts to really affect knowledge work and jobs. I think they're going to become more and more reliable there. Now, again, a lot of the early work the labs are doing is in AI research and coding and things, but that'll start trickling in to other areas of the economy. So reliability of agents on long horizon tasks is something that's critical. Meter is an organization we mentioned numerous times. They have a kind of I guess, like an emerging scaling law in a way, where they said this was from March of 2025. Their research showed AI models had a 50% chance of successfully completing a task that would take an expert human 1 hour, and that was doubling every 7 months. Now, again, their research is specific into coding, um, but the AI labs I noticed by fall of this year were referencing that research a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that same level of research will start happening in like the legal profession, HR, marketing, sales, where you start to say, okay, like here's this thing it couldn't do before. Like imagine like in a marketing, we're going to do a product launch. building an entire strategy and then developing all the components of that strategy, emails, landing pages, ads, media buying plan, all those things that might take a human expert hours. You're going to start to have these research reports that'll look at the ability of these agents to do these longer horizon tasks. So I think that that's a area that the labs are going to watch, and I think individual industries are going to start to pay much closer attention to that one, Mike.
Yeah, my God, I feel like we've talked about this before, but boy, is AI verification going to be
Yeah.
such an in-demand need and skill and maybe even job moving forward.
Yep.
We already know it's an issue, but with agents actively doing great work and going and able to do all sorts of this kind of longer horizon work, the ability to your success will be determined by your speed and ability to verify those outputs, I feel like.
Yeah, and I mean that it definitely gets into that impact on business, but I'll just say like straight up on our end, like we just made a hire for this exact thing.
Yeah.
So we just brought someone in who will start in January because we think that there's a whole new age of research to be done. And verification, to your point, Mike, is fundamental to that. Like we can perform research tasks using deep research in 10 to 15 minutes that would have probably taken 10 to 15 hours, but verification of that information is critical. And so until we staffed and had a vision for how to do that, we just couldn't apply deep research to what we were doing on a daily basis. So that was a
Yeah.
gap we identified. And I do think that, yeah, you're just going to start to have roles where that's people's jobs is just to oversee, like to guide, to develop the idea, to give the project to the agent, but then to oversee the thought process, like analyze the chain of thought it went through, verify citations, things like that. So you could definitely see that applying where more and more people's jobs is managing the agents that are doing the long horizon tasks.
Yeah, I find my own work already falling into that category. We're not doing a ton with, agents that are truly autonomous, but even just so much of my work now is verifying AI outputs and being really smart about how I'm allocating AI resources and orchestrating that work rather than creating the work myself.
Yep. So again, building on that, some other dimensions of progress that these AI models, things to watch for that we've seen a lot of progress this year, or at least it, increasingly becoming part of the conversation. Multimodality, we know text, image, video, audio, like those are core areas. They're starting to unify them into single models. Reasoning capabilities are fundamental and they continue to improve. We've just saw like the updates from both ChatGPT with new model from OpenAI and Gemini, the continued ability to do more reasoning. World models is a huge topic, the ability to understand and interact with the world around you. It's going to be fundamental. We'll talk a little bit more about that one with Demis. Recursive self-improvement, we talked a lot about on, I think it was episode 186 where I was explaining that one. Continual learning is one you hear every interview you listen to with the leading researchers at top labs. They all mention continual learning now, which is, I think I mentioned this one too in episode 186. It's the idea that you put a model out into the world and it actually gets smarter based on experience, kind of like a human would. You think about a teenager and they're experiencing the world and they're constantly, updating their own understanding and their own capabilities. Models don't do that naturally. They kind of like you train them and then they have a stopping point and then they don't really adapt until a new training is happening or fine tuning happens. Context windows getting bigger, more reliable. So imagine being able to hold your entire corpus of knowledge of your company within a single context window, and the AI assistants with high degrees of accuracy being able to interact with that knowledge base and accurately output things. So there's very few hallucinations. Those context windows become critical. And then in a sort of a related area, memory. So the ability to remember every interaction, all these things, and that enables like personalization. A few other things as the multimodality becomes increasingly better. We've seen this with VO and Imagine from Google. We're seeing it with ChatGPT's capabilities, Mid-Journey, Runway, image, video, voice, all becoming indistinguishable from reality. Like that, I think we're basically on the cusp of that with all of those modalities. And I think next year we have to deal with this as a society of like, how do we go from here? Robotics, tons of talk on robotics. I was actually just talking with Jeremiah Ouyang yesterday, who was a speaker at Macon, and he was sharing some of the things he's seeing out in Silicon Valley with robotics. It's just, I don't think most people have any clue how fast robotics is moving and how many companies are working in that space and what's going on. So I do think that robotics is going to be huge. And then consumer hardware is another. The infusion of this stuff into not only your phones, but into glasses and other ways we're going to interact. So you have Google and Apple. OpenAI is obviously making a big push into hardware. So that's going to be key. And then two other ones just on the technology front, Mike, is frontier models on device as the models become more efficient. So even we'll talk about Gemini 3 Flash that came out
Yeah.
just yesterday. And I think I said this on this podcast, but it might have been an AI Answers thing. I don't remember. But I think what Apple is doing, and I'll just reiterate this for a minute, is Apple, I think, is making a bet that the frontier models of today, 1 year from now, will be able to be served up on device
Mm.
without having to go to the cloud. And so while all of Apple's missteps and sort of embarrassments related to being unable to figure out this AI thing for the last couple of years and Siri still not being useful and things like that, I think there's a reasonable chance that within the next 12 months, they find a way to serve up very, very powerful models on the device itself, which means you can have high degrees of privacy and control without having to go out to the cloud and go out to ChatGPT for inference or, Google Gemini. And so, imagine like a very efficient version of Google Gemini living within your phone and being able
Mm.
to, now all of a sudden we achieve what we envisioned for Surrey, basically. And so I think that's going to become a key thing. And then just continued progress toward AGI and beyond into super intelligence. So I'll stop there on the technology front, Mike, and see if you've got anything else to throw in on the tech side.
No, I think that's extremely comprehensive. I love it.
Okay. So then in from a business standpoint, what does this all mean? We talked last week on episode 186 about this idea that everyone's sort of like figuring this out and every organization is scaling this and how untrue that is. Like in certain bubbles, maybe, depending on the research report and who they interviewed and which companies they looked at, it could appear as though everybody solved this. But then we had the Gallup poll we talked about. It was like, was it like 10% of knowledge
Are
workers
you?
are actually
Yeah.
using it daily?
Yeah.
So we're still so early in the adoption curve, but I do think that next year, 2026, we do start to see a lot more organizations moving from piloting to scaling, truly integrating this into every aspect, thinking about it from a change management perspective. One of the ways you do that, and kind of the next trend I would look for, is personalization of AI use cases across organizations. So when you give the thousands of Copilot licenses or Gemini licenses, you don't just hand them over and say, go figure it out. You hand them over and say, okay, sales, here's 7 core use cases for this technology. And we've pre-built copilots or GPTs for you to do these 7 things. So this idea that we actually think about adoption and engagement with these tools through a personal lens, and we don't just hand out these licenses and think
Yeah.
people will figure it out. Greater adoption of reasoning capabilities. So we've talked about this numerous times throughout this year, where people are getting these licenses for these different AI assistants, but they're just using the most basic functionality for, writing emails or summarization of meetings, which is fine. Like those are nice productivity boosts. But the using the models that can do actual chain of thought and can apply to these longer horizon tasks, these higher cognitive level tasks, my interpretation has been through many, many conversations that most organizations don't even know that that's a feature within these
Yeah.
models. Like they don't
Yeah.
even understand this process. And I often would figure this out by asking who's used deep research within one of these tools. And I would stand in front of hundreds of people and ask this question. You get like 1 or 2 hands every time. So we knew that wasn't happening. Another would be investment in AI literacy. We've talked about this a lot throughout the year. This is why we're building AI Academy and investing so much of our time and energy. It's why we have the AI Literacy Project. Everyone has come around to the fact that we need an AI literate workforce. We need students in schools to be AI literate. That we need, so businesses, schools, governments, everyone is prioritizing this. It's the number 1 skill on LinkedIn right now. It's being increasingly asked for within job descriptions. So it's just going to be, I think by this time next year, it'll be assumed that if you want to have a job, you better be AI literate and you better be
Yeah.
investing in that. Something we've talked quite a bit about recently is this idea of shifting our mindset from optimization through AI tools to innovation. So the phrase I used, the slide I used at my Maycon keynote this year was optimization is 10% thinking, innovation is 10x thinking. And so we have to think about these AI tools as problem solvers and as innovators, as assistants to those things, and not just how do we optimize an existing workflow by 10%. One other one I'll throw out here is something we've also talked a lot about is no longer thinking about IQ test as evals to say, oh, okay, GPT 5.2 came out and it increased like 10 percentage points on this IQ test that has no relevance to me as a business leader. What we're going to need to have, and what I hope we'll see more of within organizations, is custom evals tied to that organization, that industry, and then an individual of like people's own workflows and projects. So if a
Mm,
new model comes out, we can run our own internal eval and say, wow, 5.2 is dramatically better than 5 or 5.1 for this specific thing that we do as an organization or this thing I do as a person. And so I've mentioned this a couple times, but like we're working on plans to try and help people develop those evals. I've got some ideas of how to do that. So hopefully in Q1 of next year, we'll make some progress there. So then a couple other quick notes just on the business side. The future of work hypothesis, which I've shared a few times publicly, but I'll repeat it here again. This is my current hypothesis of what happens. Within 1 to 2 years, AI model advancements and agent capabilities will force a radical transformation of talent, teams, and organizational structures. Leaders face conflicting pressures to take a responsible, human-centered approach to AI adoption while leveraging AI for near-term gains in efficiency, productivity, creativity, and profitability. So that's basically the premise. And as part of that, businesses have to deal with all these unknowns, shifts in consumer behavior. There's going to be an explosion of entrepreneurship, which is going to create competition coming from everywhere. There's going to be fewer people needed to do the same work. So again, if we achieve 20, 30% efficiency gains, you don't need as many people doing the same work. Automation of tasks everywhere. Everyone becomes a creator and a developer. There's no like code needed, no technical abilities needed to build things. Premium on data and distribution as differentiators in organizations and in industries. Increase in capacity to produce more goods and services. Increase in competition. Increase in productivity and efficiency, creativity and innovation, profitability, hopefully,
mm.
but it comes with job loss. And so these are all these like things that are going to happen. And so I'll stop there from a business perspective, Mike, and then I got a few notes on the societal. We'll see if there's anything else you want to add on the business front.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I would just say overall on the business front, kind of some of the things we talked about on the enterprise, with your own evals, to evaluate your workflows, to evaluate AI's impact on your job, you also have to have workflows. You have to
Mm,
actually know what you do in your job. And I realize that sounds obvious, but I think you would be very well benefited in 2026 by starting off really documenting the steps you take to do stuff, because having that ready to go makes it so much easier to really hit the gas on AI adoption and integration.
yep. And we've got a series of tools. We'll drop a link in there, but like Jobs GPT is one that can be very helpful to
Yeah.
understand what you do. And you can even use that one to help you like kind of visualize workflows potentially. Um, so we've got some tools that are meant to try and help assess these impacts and look out ahead. All right, and then the final section is just society overall. We've talked a lot recently about these issues related to regulations, the 1,200 plus in the U.S. at least, the 1,200 plus pieces of legislation that are different stages just across all the states. The Trump administration's efforts to preempt those state laws with a federal policy, which again was the pulse question we asked last week. All of this is building into this massive political friction point where it's, and we'll touch more on some of these items today. It's like we can't go a week now without multiple government leaders from both sides of the aisle taking some position on a potentially controversial AI topic. So it's just going to become more and more next year. AI's impact on jobs, we're seeing it. We'll talk about this Brookings Institute study that's maybe saying like, okay, it's not yet, we're not there, but that doesn't
Mm.
mean it's not going to happen. So we're going to see a lot more of that. Again, I'm. This is one of those ones I would really love to be wrong, but I have a very, very high degree of confidence that we are going to see some pretty significant job disruption in early 2026 as a result of AI. And then I think that it's going to be a very challenging period for entry level workers that are graduating in the spring of 26. It might be when we really start to hear a lot of firsthand data about how challenging it's becoming to find jobs. And then AI's outweighed impact on the economy, meaning we touched recently on this idea that if it wasn't for the AI infrastructure spend right now and everything
Mm,
that's going into this, that we would likely be in a recession. I mean, it is accounting for a disproportionate amount of the growth in the economy right now. And then the other one I'll kind of end with on just like big picture society and economy um, is IPOs next year. I mean, we have potential for Anthropic, SpaceX, OpenAI. I mean, we could be seeing 3 to 5 massive IPOs next year in the AI and AI related space. And then I guess the other one I would throw out there is just society kind of trying to come to grips with where we are, like
mm.
parents having to try and figure this out, schools having to try and solve for it, businesses having to deal with it. It's just going to start to become very real in 2026, and a lot of these issues we've either been ignoring or touched on. I think they're going to come to the forefront, and it's going to be very important that we have more conversations and we try and solve some of these things.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I tend to think I just have this nagging feeling 2026 is the year where the societal backlash against AI becomes real. I
Yeah.
think we're going to 12 months from now be having conversations about people that looked at us a weird way because of what we end up doing, you know? So
Yeah.
that'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and I would say just at a very high level, like I'm still super optimistic. I
Yeah,
think we're also going to see incredible innovation in science and advancements in medicine, and like there's going to be all these amazing byproducts of this.
mhm,
And a lot of times on the show, we deal with like the challenges and things like that, and maybe we don't talk enough about the opportunities and the near term positive outcomes. But that's something we'll see too. Is there's going to be a lot of advancements made. I think sometimes it just might be overshadowed by the negatives because that's what's, draws more eyeballs and clicks and impressions, I guess.
for sure. All right. So our next big topic this week, Google DeepMind CEO Demis Hassabis did an interview on the Google DeepMind podcast, and he basically outlined a philosophical and scientific roadmap for the future of AI. So Hassabis touched on a lot of stuff in this episode, but basically was arguing that the path to AGI requires moving beyond language models to world models, and those are systems capable of simulating physical cause and effect. He posits also that if the human mind is, in fact, computable, AGI could serve as a comparative simulation to isolate unique human traits like creativity and emotion. And also looking forward, he warns that the transition to AGI will likely be, in his words, 10 times bigger and happen 10 times faster than the Industrial Revolution. He also said DeepMind is currently allocating half of its resources to scaling and half to the pure innovation needed to bridge the gap to something like AGI. So, Paul, I know longtime Demis watchers here on the
Mhm.
pod, but what did you take away from this conversation? I think it was their last episode in their series for the year.
Yeah, so Hannah Fry is amazing. Professor Hannah Fry is a brilliant mathematician, author. She's wonderful book, and she does a great job with this series. I think this was their 5th season, maybe.
Yeah.
So I've always been a huge fan of the DeepMind series. Great to go back and listen to these episodes. Um, a few that I'll highlight that jumped out at me. I actually listened to this twice. Once just listening, and the second taking notes while I was listening. Um, so he touched on this idea of jagged intelligence, which we hear Ethan Mollick yeah, he may have been the first one I think to coin like this idea of jagged intelligence. And the basic premise there is that we have this like PhD level AI at times. There's like things you could use Gemini for that you're like, okay, I am at PhD or beyond in its capabilities. And then there's other things like it's not even at a high school level. Like it'll
Mm,
just make stupid mistakes. And that jagged intelligence is really what prevents them from having confidence like, okay, we are at or very, very close to true AGI until we solve this jaggedness, I guess. He talked about different dimensions of progress. One was consistency, meaning it's like error rate drops dramatically, reasoning and thinking, which we touched on already. Um, and then he got into large language models. It said like they basically start with all of human knowledge, and then you try and compress it down. And so I'll read an excerpt here because this relates to one of the dimensions we talked about. He said, I think the main issue at the moment is we don't know how to use those systems in a reliable way fully yet in the way we did with AlphaGo. So they touched on AlphaGo. We talked about that in a recent episode, the AlphaGo documentary. But of course, that was a lot easier because it was a game. So in AlphaGo, there was like these known outcomes. There was known what you're trying to achieve, whereas language models are sort of meant to be general and solving many things at once. Said, I think once you have AlphaGo, you could go back just like we did in the Alpha series and do an Alpha Zero where it starts discovering knowledge for itself. So he's saying these language models are programmed through training processes and they don't really discover anything new on their own. But we could probably get to that point where we can have an Alpha Zero like model that starts to learn on its own. He said, I think that would be the next step, but that's obviously harder. And so I think it's good to try and create the first step with some kind of AlphaGo like system. And then when we think about an Alpha Zero like system, meaning it starts and learns on its own, but that is also one of the things missing from today's systems. It's the ability to learn and continually learn. So learn online and continually learn. So we train these systems, we balance them, we post-train them, and then they're out in the world, but they don't continue to learn out in the world like we would. So this is that continual learning idea I shared earlier. And then he finished, I think that's another critical missing piece for these systems that will be needed for AGI. He touched briefly on the scaling laws, and throughout the year, there was different people saying, oh, they're slowing down or we hit a wall. He said, I think we've never really seen any wall of ourselves. He said, there might be some diminishing returns, but you're not going to like double every year, continually. But that doesn't mean progress is necessarily slowing. You mentioned the research focus, and this is one of the areas where he's very confident in DeepMind's ability over others is that they can continue to invest heavily in research while productizing these models and introducing them in the world, where someone like an OpenAI is having to divert a lot of its what would be kind of mid and long-term research efforts to focus on trying to figure out how to make money so that they can keep raising more money. So and again, Demis talks with such humility, but it's just like stating facts. It's like, hey, we have an advantage here. Like, we're not sacrificing the long-term innovation for productization. We're doing both well. One interesting thing Hannah Fry asked about is this idea of like in AlphaGo, when it's winning at the game of Go, it had this ability to have a confidence score in its decision making. And this actually goes back to even IBM Watson back in 2011 when I first started studying AI. It was a similar concept where the AI had a confidence level of its feeling that the probability of what it was going to do was correct. And so she asked about the idea, could language models have that? Like, could they actually have a confidence score that would actually enable them to like reduce hallucinations? And he seemed that was like a viable thing. World models and simulations, he spent a ton of time talking about that. And that was fundamental to eventually having these universal agents he would envision that understands cause and effect and the mechanics of the world. It can intuit about physics and things like that. Got into AI bubble. He said it's overhyped in the short term, possibly, but it's still underhyped in the medium and long term, which I agree 100% with. I think that's the thing a lot of economists miss and investors miss. Startup funding, again, with all humility, sort of taking some veiled shots at like these labs. He's like, well, it's possible there's some bubbles where they're raising tens of millions of dollars in valuations for basically nothing. They have no sustainable business model. I don't think he was specifically talking about OpenAI at this point, but just that, yes, there's definitely a bubble when it comes to that kind of stuff. But then he got into Google's strength, which we've talked a lot about throughout the year. So he said, if there's a retrenchment, meaning like maybe there is a little bit of bubble and things pull back, he said, that's fine. I think we're in a great position because we have our own stack with TPUs, their custom chips. We also have all these incredible Google products and the profits that all that makes to plug in our AI into. And we're doing that with search. It's totally revolutionized by our overviews, AI mode. With Gemini under the hood, we're looking at Google Workspace, at email, at YouTube. And so there's all these amazing things, including Chrome, where they're building this in and like they have a wildly successful, profitable business that even if there's this like, again, retrenchment, he feels pretty good about where they're at. Touched on Nano Banana and the role that maybe plays in their path to AGI. And it's always interesting when they talk about sort of unexpected outcomes from these models that even they are surprised sometimes by what these things are capable of doing. Got into the Industrial Revolution and how that stuff happened and maybe the parallels to AI. And I think, we'll talk a little bit about Shane Legg had some similar concepts, which is basically like, it's going to be 10 times bigger, 10 times faster. So yes, we can learn from that, but this is going to happen so much faster. And that we have to, as a society, really start talking more about these things and trying to figure out how we can work through this. Because he's very optimistic, and you can't help but be optimistic as well when you hear him talk. But he's also very realistic about we haven't done enough as a society yet
Mm.
to discuss the disruption that's coming in many different areas, and we need to do that more across disciplines.
Yeah, and on that last note, I just keep revisiting his quote about this could be 10 times the impact and speed of the Industrial Revolution. And that sounds pretty grandiose, but I think that's really worth remembering because I hear from a lot of people that make the argument like, oh, we had the Industrial Revolution, we had the Internet Revolution, we'll figure it out, we'll
Yeah.
change, like, we'll adapt. That's all true. I'm not saying you're wrong, but things can happen a lot faster and at a bigger scale really quickly that throw all the rules out the window. So
Yeah.
I think it's worth considering speed and scale, not just the nature of disruption when you're thinking about how likely or unlikely it is. We're about to see some very strange times.
Yeah, so I'll grab one more excerpt. He said, "Is everything I ever dreamed of?" When she asked about like what it's like to be a part of this and like leading this, and he said, "We're at the absolute frontier of science in so many ways, applied science as well as machine learning, and that's exhilarating. As scientists know, that feeling of being at the frontier and discovering something new for the first time, and that's happening almost on a monthly basis for us, which is amazing. But then, of course, we, meaning Shane and he." And others who have been doing this for a long time understand it better than anybody, the enormity of what's coming, and this thing about it's still under actually appreciated, as we referenced. In fact, what's going to happen in more of a 10-year time scale, including to things like the philosophical, what it means to be human, what's important about that, all these questions are going to come up, and it's a big responsibility to be figuring these things out. But yeah, he's basically saying like in the next 10 years, we're going to experience, in essence, 100 years of change.
Mm.
And it's hard to prepare mentally for that and prepare as a society and prepare your business. It's again, that's why I say like 5-year plans in businesses, other than like goals and vision of what you think's possible, but the how you get there, I don't really comprehend it. Like I laid out a 5-year plan for our team recently that's literally like one page of like,
Right.
here's where I think we're going to go. And here's like the steps we'll take to do it. But the reality is we're going to be reinventing this company every like 6 to 12 months,
Right.
sometimes faster cycles, because new things become possible that we couldn't have even done before. Like deep research, which I just said we just hired a role for, didn't exist when the year started.
That's so
And we're
crazy.
reimagining an entire research firm around it.
Unreal. I didn't even think that. You're right. Wow. It feels like
It's
this year's
nuts.
been 5 years long.
Yeah. Crazy.
All right. So, in our third big topic, we are talking about another episode of the Google DeepMind podcast. And the reason is also featured Shane Legg, who is co founder and chief AGI scientist at DeepMind. And in it, he reaffirmed his longstanding prediction regarding the arrival of AGI. So, he said that he maintains his prediction of a 50-50 chance that AGI will arrive by 2028. He first made this forecast way back in 2009. And he defines this as what he calls minimal AGI. So, an artificial agent capable of performing the cognitive tasks a typical human can do. He also talked about some of the uneven performance they're seeing in models, that kind of jagged intelligence. And looking ahead, he predicts full AGI could follow within a decade after that 2028 liftoff. So, Paul, what jumped out to you here? I think this is very interesting. They're ending the year on these AGI predictions from two of the biggest and best in AI.
Yeah. And I think it's because they know it's near.
Mhm.
So I would say a lot of this episode, again, Shane's amazing to listen to. He's been at the absolute frontier of this, coined the phrase, or at least like they later found, he told the story, like they later found a research paper from like 97 that talked about AGI. But they were unaware of that paper when he sort of coined the phrase AGI in relation to what they were doing. So I would say a lot of this episode is really digging into that. Like, well, what do you consider AGI? What do you consider super intelligence? How do we define these things?
Mm.
And so it's really fascinating to listen to, but for him, it centers heavily around generality, the ability for these things to do many tasks at or above human level. And he talked about, at one point, like when they got into definitions, he said you could have this adversarial test, and this is more hypothetical. It wasn't something that like built this, But he said you get a team of people, give them a month or two or whatever they're allowed to look inside at the AI, do whatever they like with it. Their job is to find something that we believe people can typically do that's cognitive, where the AI fails at it. And
Mm.
if they can find that, then it by definition would fail the AGI definition. But if they can't, after some given period of time, like everything they give it, every task they give it that a human could do, it's capable of doing, then in essence, you're there. And so he basically said, like, he's since 2009 has predicted 2028 is when we would get to this like minimal AGI as you referenced. And he hasn't changed that. He's like 50-50. And so he said, let's see, it's still 50-50 by 2029. And then he talked just about this idea of like the AI, he got into like here's the one thing where he used the exact like tangible example we give. He said, I think we'll see is sort of the next few years is AI systems going from being very useful tools to actually taking on more of a load in terms of doing really economically valuable work.
Mm.
He said, I think it'll be quite uneven. It'll happen in certain domains faster than others. So, for example, in software engineering, in a few years, the fraction of software being written by AI is going to go up. And so, in a few years, where prior you needed 100 software engineers, maybe you need 20 using
Mm.
advanced AI tools.
Yeah.
And now I think that's actually already happening. I think that is a realistic thing in 2026 probably, but that's the exact example we've talked about, that over time you just need fewer people doing the work, and that is going to happen across every knowledge work profession. This is not limited to coding and AI research. It's going to be every component. So yeah, I don't know. Again, just great interviews. They're both fascinating to listen to if you haven't had a chance. Shane does fewer interviews than Demis.
Yeah.
So it's possible like people out there maybe haven't heard an interview with Shane. And again, I go back to this idea, like I'm not trying to pick winners and losers here, but when you listen to Shane and Demis talk, you can't help but hope that they are at the front edge of this for society and humanity's sake. Like
Yeah.
they are researchers through and through who have given their adult lives, and in Demis's case, even part of his childhood, to pursuing this idea of AGI to truly solve intelligence and science and all the biggest problems in humanity. And yes, they're part of Google, and they got in there, and they're working on products too. But like you just can't help but feel like they are truly in this for the right reasons. And you want them to be at the front edge, because I think we have the best chance of this going well if them and their team, including like Jeff Dean and some of these other amazing people at
Yeah.
Google, are a part of solving this. And Demis, I think, as much as anybody, truly wants to be collaborative. And he, I think, is the first person that's like sending the message out, like, guys, we got there. We
Yeah.
need to work together. He's the one I would want that sees it first, that then brings everybody together. Because I think that there's a chance that if some of these other labs get there first, they're not making the call to the other labs telling them we got there and we should work together now.
Mm. All right. So let's dive into our rapid fire this week. So, first up, back in October, we had talked, Paul, about this research out of the Budget Lab at Yale that
Yeah.
basically was saying widespread adoption of generative AI has not yet caused significant upheaval in employment figures. Now, there's some nuance to this report we'll get into, but basically, they were saying that in the first 33 months following the release of ChatGPT, there had been no discernible disruption in the labor market. Now, this has now become a bit of a political talking point because venture capitalist and White House AI czar David Sachs this past week highlighted these findings during a recent discussion on the mega popular All In podcast. He basically was pointing to the fact that AI is not leading to job cuts and all this is overblown. He also pointed to data we covered on a previous episode from Challenger, Gray, and Christmas that showed a spike in AI attributed job cuts in October. But then he pointed out those spikes in job cuts went away in November, and that AI is responsible for only a very small portion of layoffs. So Sachs comes out with this, uses this study as basically a political talking point. One of the researchers, Brookings senior fellow Molly Kindred, then writes on LinkedIn that, it's a good debate to have. She agrees with a lot of his perspective, but really her point is that she does disagree with him in the sense that she actually thinks that he is right that AI job fears are overblown in the short run, but she said, I think he underestimates AI's impacts in the medium to long run. So, Paul, maybe walk me through what's going on here. Sachs is just, understandably, the administration doesn't want to own any type
Right.
of job loss from AI. He makes a good point, I guess, that we're not seeing it yet in the data. Where do you fall on this?
Yeah, so we've talked many times about you can make data say whatever you want. So Molly's a great researcher. We've referenced her work a couple of times.
Yeah.
Always follow her stuff. I think she did a very good job posting on LinkedIn, kind of like addressing this situation, and we'll include that in the show notes. I'll read an excerpt here from what she said because I think this is probably the best way to handle this. Um, so you said, David is right. AI job fears are overblown in the short run. Our data shows that AI has not yet, in parentheses, caused widespread upheaval in the labor market, and it is unlikely to do so right away. I share David's skepticism of the most aggressive predictions of the AGI by 2027 crowd. Then she went on to write, but we shouldn't expect these workforce changes to happen overnight. It's still very early days. AI adoption is slow and uneven. Even transformative technologies take time to reshape labor markets. Here's where I disagree with David. I think he underestimates AI's impact in the medium long run. She said, consider the AI trajectories described this week by Demis and Legg, which we just talked about.
Mm.
She said full AGI within a decade with potentially seismic economic and social consequences. Demis suggested AI's disruptive impact would be 10 times bigger and faster than the Industrial Revolution. Both argued we need to take these futures seriously despite the uncertainty and do far more to prepare. I wholeheartedly agree, and I bet the public does too. So again, this is still Molly's post. Americans are not just fretting about dramatic headlines today. They are nervous about what lies ahead. To Tucker, she means Tucker Carlson, who's on the podcast, points out the meaning of work. Americans want leaders to grasp just how much their livelihoods and their kids' futures opportunities mean to them. They want political leaders to have their backs and to have a plan, not just for ensuring America reaches the AGI or the AI frontiers first, but for helping Americans navigate what could be unprecedented changes along the way. This won't happen if the message from the White House is, quote, there is nothing to see here. The task ahead isn't to sell AI to a skeptical public. It is to shape AI's design and deployment and our policy infrastructure so it actually serves them. Credit to Jason Kalkanis for suggesting some novel ideas, again, referring to the All In podcast. This isn't a right-left issue. Americans care deeply regardless of party.
Mm.
So I couldn't have said it any better. So I just figure I'll just read her thing. Again, I don't know David Sachs personally. I know he's doing a lot of positive things in the administration to accelerate AI development. I honestly take most of his tweets with a grain of salt, knowing he has to sort of carry this line and has to put things out publicly that the administration wants to see. I cannot believe someone like David truly believes that this isn't going to disrupt society.
Mhm.
It's, and I don't want to say it's like gaslighting because I don't know that it's necessarily meant to be to that degree. I do think it's selective use of data to, in the near term, have a talking point that aligns with Trump, and that you said the administration cannot own millions of jobs being lost in the next 12 months because of the midterms.
Yeah.
So they cannot admit that in 2 years' time, everything could change. They cannot, and they will not. You will not see that talking point from the administration, no matter how much the data says it's happening. And so I think that's just where we have to arrive at, is we have to know why people would have the talking points they have, and we have to try and listen as best we can to the neutral parties like Molly and the Brookings Institution, which may have data that shows one thing right now, but they're very open to the fact that that might show something very different in 12 to 18 months. Whereas from a political standpoint, you got to toe the line of whatever it is that's going to align with what you're trying to get out into the industry. So again, I don't. I think David probably knows his Chamath and
Yeah.
Jason, his friends aren't shy about telling him, man, you're probably off the rails on this one.
Right. Right.
And so I think he's hearing it, and I would imagine he's aware of the data that probably says it's not going to end the way he's currently tweeting it is.
Yeah, and we've said this till we're blue in the face, but it just bears repeating that you really just have to do your due diligence on
Yeah.
research. Kudos to Molly for breaking it down like that. Like,
Yeah.
you could take her research and create that headline. She admits fully and says fully, look, the research is way more nuanced than just this headline. So you got to be really careful with this stuff.
Yep. And that's a good point, Mike. Like we always say on this podcast, never read the headline. And it doesn't, again, it could come from CNN, from Fox News, from
Yeah.
the Brookings Institution, from a tweet. Never read the headline at face value. There
Yeah.
is almost always context around that headline that is relevant to your perspective on this and your point of view. We do not like, we try real hard to not like give our like points of view beyond of trying to maintain that neutrality of like, let's see this from as many sides as we can and like allow you, the listener,
Yeah.
to arrive at your point of view. And I think this is one of those instances where right, left doesn't matter. Like we all have jobs, we all have kids who we need to worry about. And like, it doesn't matter what your political affiliation is when it comes to that. We're just trying to deal with the reality of all the people who know, who are in the labs, who are seeing the future, looking at the models one generation ahead, long before you and I see them.
Yeah.
They sure as hell think disruption is coming.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put my money on them. Like I believe they know what's going to happen. And I think we should be preparing as though it's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows.
I could not agree more. All right, next up, Google has released Gemini 3 Flash, which is a new version of Gemini designed to deliver high-level reasoning capabilities at significantly faster speeds. The company is positioning this as an effort to bring frontier intelligence of the recently launched Gemini 3 architecture to high-frequency tasks without the associated latency or costs. So this model is very smart, does very well in a number of benchmarks, and interestingly, Google reports that Gemini 3 Flash outperforms the previous Gemini 2.5 Pro model, which was very, very good, while running 3 times faster and using, on average, 30% fewer tokens to complete standard tasks. So, effective immediately, Gemini 3 Flash replaces the 2.5 version as the default model for all users in the free Gemini app globally. It is also actually rolling out as the underlying engine for AI mode in Google search. Now, Paul, this is an awesome release, it looks like. It's, I think, important to remember that we're not just getting bigger and better models. That's not the only thing to be tracking here. We're getting much faster, smaller, and cheaper models, which kind of plays into what you've said many times, which is we're going to see intelligence everywhere because
Yeah.
it is going to be small, fast, cheap, on device, maybe even basically free.
Yeah, and again, without getting all the technical details, you kind of highlighted it. I think the main takeaway for people, without getting again overwhelmed by the technical side, the models keep getting more efficient.
Hmm.
Every 6 to 12 months, basically the thing that was the frontier today. So take 3 Pro or 5.2 Pro from ChatGPT. Assume in like 6 to 12 months that model is going to cost 10 times less and it's going to be able to be served up 10 times more efficiently. Like that's basically the trajectory we're on, is they're able to keep taking the thing that is state of the art today and in 6 to 12 months, basically making that now available way cheaper, way faster, and eventually on devices.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what we're going to keep seeing continuing. And what they've realized is most people just don't need the state of the art model. So like you don't need it. Like even if you go to Gemini right now, so I'm looking at like the model choice, you have Gemini 3. So I'm in the Gemini app.
Yeah.
It says fast, which is answers quickly,
Yep.
thinking, solves complex problems, and pro, they specifically say for advanced math and code. So they're basically like, hey, if you're not doing advanced science stuff, you don't even need this model. Like you're probably not even going to find value in it. It's not even going to be that different. And then when you go to ChatGPT, they have auto, which decides how long to think, which is almost always going to then give you the fastest one.
Yeah.
They have instant, which is answers right away. Thinking thinks longer for better answers. And then pro, which they define as research grade intelligence. So they are definitely just trying to like get you to these lower models because they know like 99% of use cases don't need the pro. Which I do start to wonder, like, what am I paying the $200 a month for? Because I don't
Right.
really have a use case for the pro right now. So yeah, just good stuff. And I think again, this is why I was saying like you could have a Surrey in 3 to 6 months that actually does what it's supposed to do on your iPhone,
Yeah,
because they could just embed Gemini 3 Flash into it, and all of a sudden it's like, boom, you just fixed it.
that would be amazing.
Yeah.
All right, next up, OpenAI has initiated preliminary talks with investors regarding some massive new fundraising efforts. According to Reuters, the company is discussing raising funds at a valuation of approximately $750 billion. I think this is also or perhaps originally broken in the information as well. And if finalized, this would mark a roughly 50% jump from the company's reported valuation just a few months ago. The report indicates OpenAI could raise as much as 100 billion in this round to support its unrelenting demand for computing power. Now, interesting wrinkle here, a key player in these discussions is Amazon, and the information reports that Amazon is in talks to invest at least 10 billion in the company. And under these terms, OpenAI would use Amazon's proprietary Trainium chips for AI workloads, and Amazon might potentially help sell enterprise versions of ChatGPT. So, Paul, like another week, another huge amount of money being raised by OpenAI. Like, are they just going to be raising money forever? Like, I say that almost half jokingly. Like, what is the price tag on all this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess they're trying to get to the IPO, but yeah, I mean, I think the number you cited, the 750, I think that's pre-money,
Yeah.
maybe, because the
Okay.
Wall Street Journal had it like 830 billion.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's possible it's like a pre-money valuation. So again, if you don't follow like the kind of investing, like if the company's valued at 750 million or 730 million today, and then they raise 100 billion, now it's at 830 billion. So it's funny because I actually, this might not be what's happening, but I'm almost convinced it is.
Hmm.
We just talked about SpaceX's 850 billion, and they're going to IPO probably in 2026. There is no way Sam Altman and Elon Musk aren't fully aware of the valuation of each other's companies, and that like you got to think that it's, if SpaceX raises at or does the secondary internal at 850, that somehow magically the valuation of OpenAI doesn't end up being 860 billion when all is
Right.
said and done. And then like if OpenAI is going to IPO for 1.3 trillion, I guess when you're worth half a trillion dollars, like you got to find your amusement somewhere.
Right.
So yeah, it's again like just crazy numbers, and like I referenced earlier in terms of the trends for next year, these are things to watch. We're talking about just insane values for privately held companies that are all going to go public in the next like 18 months.
So, some other OpenAI news as well this past week. They have also released a major update to the visual generation capabilities in ChatGPT. There's a new version of ChatGPT Images powered by a flagship model called GPT Image 1.5. This release prioritizes granular control over your image editing. So, according to OpenAI, the model can now execute precise instructions. It can add, subtract, or blend specific elements. It'll preserve the original image's lighting, composition, and subject likeness. The company notes that the system adheres more reliably to user intent and offers improved rendering for small and dense text. So, Paul, it sounds like OpenAI is just making their bid to catch up with Nano Banana Pro, which kind of sucked all the oxygen out of the ecosystem with how much people were raving in a great way about that.
I haven't tried it, but the stuff I was just monitoring on X is like OpenAI got cooked by Nano Banana Pro, and they have not caught up
Yeah.
basically. So it's not that it's not a good usable model, but they like OpenAI knew that like the reason it's a 1.5 is they know this is not on Nano Banana Pro level,
Yeah.
but they're obviously trying to catch up. And I saw a couple articles talking about how they really had to like ramp up the investment in the image thing because of Nano Banana Pro. So yeah, again, to end this year, the momentum has certainly swung to Google on basically every front. The
Yeah.
model, the language model, the image model, the video model. I would imagine world models. Like, yeah, if you had to force rank who's ahead in the race, it seems to be Google by quite a quite a distance at the moment. Not to say OpenAI is not going to figure this out and get back in the game early in 2026, but Google's looking pretty good right now.
Yeah, my gosh, if you had looked at the headlines 12 months ago, that's not the
Yeah,
story
they were
that they would have
done.
been telling. All right. Next up, there's been kind of an ongoing item we've been covering on this podcast about author Karen Howe and her book on AI. She has actually now issued a formal correction in her recently published book, Empire of AI. This is, if you'll recall from past segments, regarding the water footprint of AI data centers. So, a researcher, Andy Massley, published basically an analysis in the last month or two of Howe's book, identifying basically a statistical error regarding a proposed Google data center in Chile. And the text originally claimed the data center would consume 1,000 times the water volume of a nearby city, which is like an eye catching fact in the book. But Massley realized that the actual usage would be roughly one quarter of what the city used. So that's a huge discrepancy of 4,500 times. And it was caused by basically just a unit mix up between liters and cubic meters. So just this idea that basically there was a mix up and it resulted in saying that data centers use way, way, way more water in Chile than they actually do. Now, here's where this gets amplified and politicized because White House staffers David Sachs and Sriram Krishnan characterized the original claim as basically a hoax, saying that concerns about AI water usage is a hoax and not real, and the book's errors prove that. Now, Howe has since confirmed the unit error in the source document. She's issued a correction. She detailed the updates on her website. Massley updated his analysis to commend Howe for her direct engagement and correction of the text. So, Paul, it's good to see Karen issue the correction. Seems like she handled this like really well. So kudos to her. I can't shake the feeling this like debate though not only has really important issues, we should really be maybe questioning some of the narratives around data center water usage, it sounds like, but also at the same time, this just went off the rails and showed off like the worst of the internet.
Yeah, I mean, people get ugly with this
Yeah.
stuff. And again, like you gotta anytime it's political, you just have to understand why people would be doing what they're doing and saying what they're saying. So I try to avoid getting like frustrated when it comes to politics because I understand enough how the game is played to just like not get into this stuff. Um, yeah, I mean, I think Karen handled it with as much humility as you can and journalistic integrity. No one wants to make a mistake. Mike, you and I have written books. Like, you don't want
Yep.
to make a mistake, and especially when you did the hard work and you went to reliable sources, and the data just wasn't what you thought it was, and like nobody wants to screw up that way. And this is a best selling book. I would imagine it's probably sold over 100,000 copies. I don't know the
Right.
exact number, but um, it's an embarrassing thing to go through, but she owned it. She did the research. She looked it up. She made the fix. Like the 100,000 books that are out there are going to have the wrong data point, and as an author, that sucks. Like again, you don't want to put something out there. Now, if it's in the digital world, like you go and make the change, the edit. Now it's in the Wayback Machine, but like the site's
Yeah.
different. Anybody reads it's going to see something different. Um, so yeah, I just have empathy for Karen as a good person. I know her. We had her speak at Macon. She's a good person. She's an amazing journalist, and she works hard. And I know she didn't make the air intentionally. Like it's
Right. Right.
so I want and I hate when the bad side of people comes out and they feel like they need to pile on a good person who made an honest mistake and obviously had no intention of falsifying information to make a political point.
Right.
So yeah, again, I just hope that people can be understanding. Just the internet can be an ugly place sometimes. So
Well, unfortunately, our next bit is also about politics over here. We are basically increasingly having a regular bit here on the podcast,
mhm.
a roundup of the latest political stories in AI happening right now. So, this past week, this issue has kind of blown up a bit. AI infrastructure and governance are moving to the center of the debate. So, first, there's a new report from Politico detailing how the tech industry is launching multi-million dollar lobbying campaigns to counter growing voter opposition to data centers, which critics argue strain local resources. This follows a statement from Senator Bernie Sanders calling for a moratorium on new data center construction to ensure democracy can, quote, catch up to the technology's growth. State and industry leaders are also advancing competing regulatory visions. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis recently proposed an AI Bill of Rights to protect residents. The framework would prohibit government agencies from using Chinese created AI tools. It would criminalize deepfakes depicting minors and ensure AI is not the sole determinant in insurance claim denials. And then finally, venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz released a roadmap for federal AI legislation, arguing that Congress must establish national standards to prevent a patchwork of state laws. So, Paul, big thing stands out here. That data center topic really seems like both sides of the aisle are drawing battle lines around that.
Yeah. Again, politics is like one of my least favorite things to talk about. Um, so, I mean, one thing to know in politics is you have to propose extremes and then you try and like meet at a middle ground. So, usually when a proposal is made from whomever it is, you're trying to like get people thinking in an extreme and then you eventually get them to where you actually want. Obviously, we're not going to stop building data centers. That's a ridiculous concept. But the point is to try and raise awareness about what's going wrong and things. And so you can make some progress on, getting your constituents to like start seeing the side that you want them to see. And so whatever, that is not going to happen. It's a fine idea. The stuff DeSantis is doing, I don't know, there's elements of it that seem viable,
Yeah.
seem worth discussion. The A16Z roadmap for federal AI legislation, all I will say there is, to reiterate what I said earlier, is you have to understand the context with which things are created and the points of view and the financial interests of the parties who are creating something. And if you want to read the roadmap for federal AI legislation as an objective piece of content, I'll say, I would first go reread the Techno Optimist Manifesto from A16Z and Mark Andreessen. And so at least have the context of that manifesto in your mind when you read the federal AI legislation recommendations. That's all I'm going to say on this topic. I will say to
And
end the year in a positive mind frame.
and perhaps also positive, maybe refresh your memory on the recent executive order on AI that we talked about a couple
Yes.
episodes ago.
Yes.
Because that
And
is related.
yes. And again, I am not taking a point of view here that the idea of the federal approach is bad.
Right.
I don't, it actually makes a ton of sense in my mind. All I'm saying is I want to read objective, as close to objective and neutral opinions of why the different approaches are good and bad. And sometimes it's really hard to find stuff that doesn't have financial interests and political interests tied to their points of view.
Right.
And so the best we can often do is read the extremist stuff on both sides and try and say, what would the middle ground be to these opinions? Because the stuff that's neutral and just objective often doesn't get any attention. And thereby it's hard to find the reasonable logic-based stuff. And you just find the stuff that has very specific points of view for very specific personal reasons.
All right, next up, investor and industry attention is surging around world models, which are AI systems designed to simulate physical reality rather than just process text or images and the like. Now, according to a report from AI industry watcher Alex Heath, the startup General Intuition is in late stage talks to raise several $100 million at a valuation north of $2 billion. And they are focused on building a general purpose AI agent and world model. Now, that coincides with a new strategic roadmap that Runway published, which basically unveiled its vision for a quote, universal world simulator. Runway, the video generation company, argues that video models trained at scale essentially become physics simulators. They learn how objects move and forces propagate. The company predicts it will achieve interactive simulations indistinguishable from the real world within 5 years. And they claim this approach will eventually replace physical infrastructure for scientific discovery, allowing researchers to test things in fields like robotics and climate science without needing traditional laboratories. Now, Paul, we've talked about this a couple times as a thread throughout this episode. Seems like world models are increasingly being talked about or perceived as maybe the next big piece of the future of AI.
Yeah, it's also fundamental. Jan LeCun, who recently left Meta, it's pretty
Yeah.
fundamental what they're doing. But yeah, so and again, like, so I'll just try and explain this at like the most simplistic level, which we've touched on a couple times. But the basic premise is for years, they train these models, giving them all of human knowledge in a text-based form. And somehow those language models actually seem to start to develop an understanding of the physics of the world just through reading about it. When you start to give computers vision, or training them on videos, the assumption is you could make more progress towards their understanding of the physical world and their ability to eventually interact with it. When you listen to people like Demis talk about this, the thing that's somewhat shocking is they seem to actually gain this emergent capability faster than they thought would happen by just showing them physics,
Hmm.
basically. And so to get to these universal agents and eventually have those embodied in robotics that can walk around facilities or work in nursing care homes, be available for purchase to have in your home, they have to understand the world like you and I do. They have to know if I knock this cup over, the water is going to pour out onto the floor and what it's going to look like and how it's going to work and how the fluid dynamics works. Like, from a very early age as kids, I mean, toddler,
Yeah.
you just, I'm going to touch something and it's hot and I'm going to get burned, or if I step here, I'm going to slip, or if I step on ice, I'm going to fall. That takes like experience and developing this intuitive understanding of physics. And that's like what they think needs to happen, that the AI models, to truly reach human level intelligence and beyond, they actually have to be able to experience the world the same way you and I do, and perceive that, and actually like predict what will happen in advance. And that
Yep.
requires that real world experience. So that's the bet of world models. It's a bet of Fei Li and Jan LeCun and Demis Hassabis and Sam Altman and OpenAI. Like, everyone knows that this matters a lot. And there's going to be a lot of effort to be made or breakthroughs in this area. A lot of money is going to get poured into world models.
Yeah, and who knows what the predictions and timelines, but that's pretty interesting runway is saying we're going to basically have this within 5 years.
Yeah, again, the timelines are hard. What that means, have it, like, what is that? What are the outcomes of having it? Does it mean we can
Right.
play real-time video games that dynamically generate the world as we're turning to the right and to the left, and like in that rendering speed and things like that?
Yeah.
Or does it mean like 10 seconds and 15 seconds at a time? Like, that's what we just don't know. But I no doubt that we're going to get very far along, and by the end of the decade, I think it's very realistic. Humanoid robots are a very real thing throughout society, and
Mm.
they're interacting with the world the same way a human would. And so I don't doubt those timelines.
I look forward to that future.
I think I do. I'm also
I
terrified by
hope, I
that
guess.
future,
Yeah.
man.
There's ways
I'm
it could go
afraid of
wrong.
my vacuum robot. I don't know about like a
Yeah. Yeah.
humanoid robot walking around my house.
All right, our last topic before we wrap up here. The White House is launching a new initiative to embed private sector technical talent into the federal government. This is dubbed the U.S. Tech Force. And this program aims to recruit approximately 1,000 engineers and specialists to work on AI infrastructure, application development, and data modernization across federal agencies. Now, interestingly, this initiative centers on a collaboration with leading tech firms, including Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, NVIDIA, and OpenAI. Under the agreement, private sector partners can nominate employees for government service and have committed to considering program alumni for full-time roles once their federal terms conclude. Now, this, of course, comes after the executive order signed earlier this week establishing national AI policy frameworks. So, Paul, seems interesting, probably something pretty well needed within government. Kind of interesting, too. The AI labs are embedding even deeper into the federal government.
Yeah, you know who's not on that list? Anthropic.
Yep.
Jumped out at me
Very
right away.
conspicuous absence.
Yeah. Um, again, at a high level, conceptually, cool idea. The government needs the best scientists. I don't know how many of them are leaving
You're right.
private sector for 150,000 a year, and that's like not even their signing bonuses most of the time. So I don't know how that works. Like, if the labs are offsetting the salaries, but like, I don't know an AI researcher that's leaving Anthropic or OpenAI or
Right.
XAI to go make a couple $100,000 working for a government they maybe don't agree with. Yeah, I don't know. Again, cool concept. I will be interested to see how well this actually works. But I have not dug into all the details of. I'm sure they've thought through a lot of the challenges I can
Yeah.
see straight off just looking at this at the surface level.
Yeah. All right, Paul. Well, thanks again for breaking everything down for us this week. Just as a quick reminder to folks, if you could go ahead and leave us a review and follow us on your podcast platform of choice, that would be very, very helpful for us to improve the show and reach more folks. And go ahead and remember to take that AI Pulse survey this week at smarterx.ai/pulse. Paul, thanks again.
Yeah, and again, thanks for a great year, everyone. We will be back January 6th with the first edition of 2026. In the meantime, go check out some of the past episodes. The one I would tell you, if you enjoyed the trends to watch, go listen to episode 141. That's when I did the Road to AGI. Not much has changed, honestly. If you could go listen to that Road to AGI episode, there really isn't anything on that list I would change. And I got asked that question recently, like, oh, what were you wrong? What predictions have you had wrong recently? I was like, they're not predictions, but like, trend-wise, I'm still feeling pretty good about the timeline I laid out for the next few years. So I would say go check out that episode. We'll drop the link in the show notes. All right, Mike, thanks. Great job this year. Looking forward to another wild year of AI next year. And again, everyone, happy holidays, happy New Year, and we'll talk to you in the new year. Thanks for listening to the Artificial Intelligence Show. Visit smarterx.ai to continue on your AI learning journey and join more than 100,000 professionals and business leaders who have subscribed to our weekly newsletters, downloaded AI blueprints, attended virtual and in-person events, taken online AI courses, and earned professional certificates from our AI Academy, and engaged in the SmarterX Slack community. Until next time, stay curious and explore AI.